and this is the Agegroup Multisport podcast with me, Richard Conway. This is a platform for Agegroup Multisport athletes to showcase their journeys. Welcome along to episode 72 of the Agegroup Multisport podcast, and thanks once again for taking your time out to give us a listen. Much appreciated. Hope your training's going all right. Looks like on Instagram the athletes that I've been following have done lots of training, lots of Easter eggs, getting ready for the events coming up, so it's all good to watch and to see. On this episode we have Adam Whittaker, and Adam reached out via email and asked to come onto the podcast to share his story. And Adam won't mind me saying this, that his strength is his cycling. Started off primarily as a cyclist, doing lots of time trials and wonderful distances, as we'll go into. And it's also in his genetics. Adam tells us about his grandad being a very good cyclist and almost reaching Olympic standard back in the day. So with those and a lot of passion and hard work, Adam's turned it to his advantage, being his strongest leg in the multisport events that he takes part. He's not been doing multisport that long, but in the short time that he has been doing it, in 2020 he came third in his age group at the European Standard Duathlon Champs, and in 2022 at the World Standard Duathlon Champs he came. He also discusses some of the quirky events that he likes to do on the bike and the touring that he's previously done, and what his futures hold in the multisport world. He's looking to get into triathlon, having done a few already. I think he's looking long term at completing an Ironman. So we'll get into all that. Really good chat, really nice fella. Hope you enjoy it. That's coming up. One thing I come across in the news, and Agegroup News also had it on, something that they're calling a race ranger. And this is some technology that allows athletes on the bike leg of longer distance events where time trialling pretty much is what you're doing, and you've got to keep a distance of, I think it's 12 metres now. There's this thing called the race ranger that allows the athlete to gauge where they're at. I think it's a light that comes up, and if you're in the green you're okay, and if you're in the red you're too close. I think they're trialling it out in Ibiza at the World Championships, so that would be amazing if that filtered down to age group at some point. So have a look out for that. Looks like some really good technology. It's called the Race Ranger. Some great sport on over the bank holiday weekend. The Arena Games Super League World Final was on. Pretty good to watch. Ever seen the format? It's indoors and they're using Zwift, treadmill and bike, and 50 metre pool usually. And they're usually back-to-back mini triathlons. And it was a really good final. Both men and women's was close. The Australian Sophie Lynn came out on top for the women's, although she didn't win the day. That was Beth Potter who won in London. But as Beth hadn't raced in any of the others, she didn't get the points to keep a title that she won last year. And in the men's, it was won by Henry Sherman, who came second on the day, behind the Italian Nicolo Strada, who came second overall. Exciting racing, and it's really funny to watch the Zwift bikes and the Zwift running, and watch the avatars racing around the track. And I actually raced on the cycling track. Super League had put one up on Zwift, and I give their track a go. It was quite hard actually going up the hill. But yeah, so if you haven't seen that, have a look at that. That was a pretty good watch. And secondly was Paris-Roubaix, Hell of the North, arguably the biggest one-day classic on the cycling calendar, and never without incident, going over the cobblestones like they do, at speeds that they do, crashes galore, and Matthew van der Poel came out on top. Fortunate, some might say, because Van Aert had a puncture within the last, I think it was 15 kilometres to go, and could never get back on terms. And it was a solo ride in for Matthew van der Poel. But he was the most attacking cyclist anyway for me, so I think it was well deserved. So that was a nice weekend of sport. Also been listening to a few podcasts as usual. First one is from Simon Ward, the High Performance Human podcast. And he had on, his topic was how to be a more efficient runner. And he had on Bobby McGee as a guest, who's a world-renowned run coach. They were discussing the key to better running, and they reckon it's mechanical efficiency. So they were talking about biomechanics, posture, and the importance of dynamic mobility and running drills, specific strength work, and specific advice for us older runners on how to adapt our training to stay healthy. So it was a really good podcast, and it was quite refreshing to hear about the dynamic mobility and running drills, because it's something that we've implemented at our track sessions as a warm-up before we actually do the main set. And when we first started it, it took athletes a little bit to get the head round it, doing A skips and B skips and C skips and funny walks and lunges and that sort of thing. But eventually they've come to realise how important it is not just to go and do 2 laps of the track as a warm-up, but actually to put some of these other dynamic stretches in to help. It was nice to see that we were on the right track after listening to Bobby McGee, the world-renowned running coach. And a few of us have started doing run-specific strength workout that's put on by our local leisure club. So that was pretty good to hear that that's a worthwhile thing to do as well. So yeah, good podcast. Really enjoyed that. Wealth of knowledge, as you would expect. The second one is an episode of Triathlon Mockery, and they were talking about doped up marathoners and transgenders in professional women's sport. And they didn't hold back, to be honest. So their thoughts on that, quite refreshing. So go and have a listen to Joan Tom's discussion on that matter. And also congratulations to Joe, he's just become a father. And he was talking about trying to get a sponsorship of a push chair or buggy to do, which was quite funny, to do a marathon. He was trying to hit a fastest marathon time with a buggy, and they have a discussion about that. And he was a bit put out that one of the pushchair manufacturers that he'd reached out to didn't really want anything to do with it. So hope he gets somewhere with that, because that would be quite amusing to watch. Finally, the last podcast that I really enjoyed was How They Train, and that featured John Rogers, who is one of the most decorated and famous swim coaches in the world. And he coaches triathletes such as Jan Frodeno, Braden Curry, and Tim O'Donnell was in there as well. And it's just basically his take on swimming. It's quite brutal, to be honest. But he gets results. 85 years old and he's still going strong. Been coaching for 54 years. Yeah, really worth a listen. Lots of knowledge, lots of information. So there's a few podcasts for you to look up. Really enjoyed them. And finally, my running's gone back on hold. Yet another injury. Was at the track, and after doing a good session, Achilles started playing up. So it's just been really, really sore for the last few weeks. So I've knocked back the running. Done maybe 2 sessions in the last fortnight. It's still painful, been icing it. Been doing a few exercises to try and bring it on. And mainly been swimming and biking. So Mrs. C's putting the hours in. She's ticking all the boxes off in a training plan, and she's starting to see the dividends of it. So it's nice to see. We've got Clumber Park coming up, which is the world qualification for next year in sprint duathlon, and we shall see how that goes. Running form's not going to be great, but we'll see. And that's about it for now. So over to the main event. Hope you enjoy Adam's story and we shall see you on the other side.
How's things? Okay?
Yeah, not too bad at all. Thank you very much. And yourself?
Yeah. Looks like you had a good time in Italy.
Oh, it was it was absolutely fantastic. Really had a great time. It was I think it's one of the best ones I've been to be honest.
Oh, awesome.
And I think there was a group of us from our club. 5 of us qualified, and there was 7 of us went all together. So that makes a big difference.
Yeah. No,
so,
that's cool.
So it was really special. Really good. So anyway, thank you for agreeing to come on and share your story and hopefully inspire others of all the other athletes that have been on have done, I'm sure. Much appreciated. Introduce yourself first.
My name's Adam Whittaker. I'm 27 years old. I'm currently living in Cardiff, down in South Wales. I'm from Bristol originally, between Bristol and Bath originally. I've been doing sort of multi-sport for 3 years now, I suppose, but cycling for nearly 10, and then running maybe 5. So that's where sort of the background is. For work, I'm an engineer essentially. I work for a large aerospace manufacturing company, based in the southwest, based in the southwest basically. So you mentioned sort of growing up and sport I'd done there. I think I was always a fairly sporty child growing up. I was very much encouraged by parents to take part in whatever sport that was. Sort of it was a very unusual mix, I suppose, of through sort of, I guess, into kind of primary school. It was the kind of usual mix of football and rugby and things like that. And then into secondary school, I did actually run for a few years. I joined my local athletics club at the time, and oddly sort of floated around there as a kind of 12, 13-year-old, kind of doing a bit of whatever was going on, I suppose. And eventually settled on sort of hurdles being my my sport, which was not what I would have expected, but did that for a few years.
Was that 100-meter hurdles or was it 400?
100-meter hurdles. I think it was actually even less than that, because it was they do shorter distances for juniors, but sort of sprint hurdles. So very different to sort of the stuff I'm doing now. But and then did that for a few years, and then I think there was a group of us from school started doing it, but ended up joining a men's hockey team for a few years as a group of friends, and did that for a few years. And I'm relatively tall, I suppose, 6 foot, just over 6 foot, and hockey didn't really do my back much good growing up, basically. So quit doing that, stopped doing that, and then had a few months of not really doing a lot, age kind of 17, 18, I suppose. And joined the local cycling club. I think a lot of people my age sort of did the university route and the cycling clubs in various universities and things like that. I was an apprentice, so I was kind of a little bit of a late starter to things like that. But yeah, 17, 18, started going along with my local club, Salt and Sham Cycling Club. That was Salford and Keynsham, to anyone from the Bristol area. And so started going along with them. They met every Saturday morning and did a sort of 30-mile loop and a cafe stop. I was relatively one of the younger people there, but no, it was certainly built on the foundations of where I am now, I suppose. So. And
how did you get into cycling, Adam?
It was actually a bit of a family connection. My granddad, back in 1950s, was a very good time trial rider. He almost Olympic standard in his day. Yeah, it was at a time when things were not as professional as they are now. So he couldn't really give up the time from working at BT, going up the telegraph poles. But that was sort of the connection, I suppose, of seemed to kind of take after him. Let's give cycling a go. So just went down and joined the local club. and he was sort of still cycling a little bit at the time, and he's, you know, well into his 90s now, and cycled into his 80s. Sorry, he's nearly 90, and he cycled well into his 80s. So yeah, kept it up. And then sort of moving from there, it was joining the local cycling club at 17, 18, can't quite remember, and then kind of starting essentially just cycling at the time rather than any multi-sport stuff. So, you know, the usual mix for cycling of sort of bunch racing, time trials, things like that, and then found myself to be a little bit better at the time trial type efforts, the longer efforts, 20 minutes plus, rather than the sort of punchy efforts involved with a bit of group riding. And then so from there, moved up sort of the distances, I suppose, of time trialing. So started out doing 10 mile, 25 mile, 50 mile. And I think the longest I did with Salt and Sham Cycling Club was a 100 mile time trial. And then from there, it was actually started running a little bit. I mentioned earlier I took a sort of an apprenticeship route into my professional career, but just due to working full time and trying to study, cycling was a little bit harder to fit in. So just started running a little bit on the evenings, you know, 20 minutes at 9, 10 o'clock at night after we've done the coursework, just a bit of fresh air. So yeah, started running a little bit, and actually the first sort of competitive running thing I did, I suppose, was a work after. I'm not really sure what to describe it as, a bit of a competition they used to do after work down the cycle track next to our office, and it was a 5 kilometer sort of staggered start time trial essentially. You know, you estimate a time, and you try and beat that. Just a bit of fun and something to build teamwork and things, I guess. And first time I did it, didn't really know what to expect. I think I guessed sort of 22 minutes or something for 5K. I think I ran something like 18 minutes or something. So sort of figured, okay, I can run here a little bit. And then from there, I sort of had a bit of a cycling, you know, the cyclist in me and the competitive person within me maybe wanted to try a bit of both. My swimming, I had swum as a kid, and I'd actually worked as a lifeguard for a few years, so my swimming was okay, but not really competitive standards, so I didn't really fancy a triathlon. And today, some duathlons at Castlecombe racetrack on Castlecombe in Wiltshire. On an evening, it was basically a 2 mile run, 1 lap of the racetrack, followed by five laps of the racetrack, which was just under 10 miles, followed by another 2 mile run. And I think the first one I entered, I came third or something. And it was sort of just built up from there, really, only sort of local things. And then there was a couple of other guys who both were involved with Agegroup, basically, duathlon, and right. They sort of mentioned it to me. So that was Chris Mills and Mark Jerzak, who both lived sort of relatively locally to me at the time. And they sort of mentioned it. So okay, let's have a look at how this works. You know, went onto the British Triathlon website and had a look through. Okay, what will be a, you know, a reasonable thing to try and qualify for. So my first sort of aim was the 2020 European Standard Duathlon champs. So kind of went from there. Okay, what event do I need to do to qualify? And it was a I forget the name of the racetrack, but sort of Milton Keynes kind of direction. It'll come to me in a minute. But yeah, essentially a very rainy March, entered that very rainy March day would have been 2019. As an age group qualifier for the 2020 European Duathlon champs, which was in I'm sure many of you listening would have been there, Punta Umbria in southwest Spain near Were you there, Richard?
I was.
Yeah.
I was.
And that was my first sort of experience of age group. Sort of stunning location. Absolutely loved it down there. And it was, didn't really know what to expect. I think I'm probably a slightly stronger cyclist than runner, just from having that background. But I just remember the first run of that, first age group experience, that real step up. There was people doing 32, 33 minute 10K straight out the gun in the standard distance race. Was a bit left behind, but then managed to claw back some time on the bike, I think, and then sort of hold that onto the run. But ended up being a third place, a first attempt, which was a good result. A little bit unexpected, but yeah, good result. And then I guess you remember, and probably a lot of other people can other people remember, but this was about a week before the first COVID lockdown. Straight back into the country and then straight into lockdown. But result, I suppose, I managed to carry with me into 2021, and because of the lack of qualifying events or suitable qualifying events, there was I think British Triathlon at the time was sort of accepting any results people did have from 2020. So I managed to use that to qualify for the world and the European standard distance duathlons in 2021, which I think then got rolled over to 2022. I have to double check that, but in the end ended up just going to the World Championships, which was in Târgu Mureș in Romania earlier in the summer. Fantastic event. It was around a racetrack basically on the day, which was so standard distance again, so 10K run. It was 4 2.5K out and backs basically, and it was a particularly tough run route. Basically the first half of that 2.5K was uphill, and then the next was downhill. And again, I remember racing, I think it was Jordan Lockett, one of the other GB guys, and he sort of had him in my sights for a little bit on the run, and then he left me. And then getting onto the bike, really tricky bike course actually, because it was very rolling and quite technical, several sort of dead turns in it and things like that. But I think that kind of suited me a little bit more because of, again, a bit of a cycling background of having started racing in bunches and things like that of 100 people. The bike control is maybe a little bit better than some, so that I guess played to my advantage and managed to establish a bit of a lead there, and then brought it home with a run to finish first in my age group, which was a surprise. That's 2 out of 2 on the podium, which was both of which were unexpected, but very pleased with that result. So not going to be going ahead this year, just with other targets. I had pre-qualified for Ibiza, but just sort of other targets getting in the way. So I'm looking at doing a middle distance triathlon later in the summer this year, with the intention of qualifying for the world or European middle or long distance duathlons in 2024. So that should be me back in the age group game, but just on a slightly different path. So
well, it's always good to mix it up, isn't it, and try different things. So that's a fantastic journey that you've just spread out in one go. But just going back to the cycling, when you were 17, 18 and you were doing time trials and things, how did that, because I also started cycling when I was at school, and I was looked on a bit of a weirdo for doing it, because not many people got a bike and went out especially back, I'm 55 now, so you can imagine back in those days it was a bit of a strange thing for a kid to do. How did your peers and friends, what did they think of it, and how did you get around that?
It's a good question. I guess I sort of started doing it at a bit of a strange time, because I only really, I guess I sort of started cycling. I was commuting a little bit as well. I was going to college. I think it's about 5 or 6 miles from my parents' house, and was sort of cycling in. But it was, I guess I never really saw any kind of barriers to that. I guess, I mean, all the sports I'd played for a few years up to that were not unusual, I wouldn't say, but probably not the standard football, rugby type things, a bit of hockey and athletics and things like that. So I guess that was something I was sort of used to. And then in that first year or so of cycling, I'd started an apprenticeship, so essentially working full time. Whereas with maybe the average age of some of the people I was working with, it was kind of seen as a bit more normal. So yeah, no, didn't have any barriers at all. No sort of stigmas against me, which was positive. So generally very, very encouraging.
Oh, that's great to hear. I mean, obviously now it's a lot more popular because we've had the likes of the Sky team, that just took cycling in Britain to another level, especially when Bradley Wiggins won, Tour de France, and then we've had Chris Froome throughout the last several years, and then Geraint Thomas and Mark Cavendish, all those brilliant British cyclists have definitely lifted the profile of it. But certainly back in the day when I was growing up, it was a bit of a strange sport. Not many people knew anything about it unless you were into it. I mean, it's really good to hear that it has changed and it's progressed. And I guess you see that. I mean, I'm still a massive cycling fan, and I watch all the cycling. And you're seeing all the young lads coming through, like Ethan Hayter and his brother, and they're just developing. And there's more and more cyclists still coming into the sport, and it's just really nice, because at one point there was the odd one too, and it was mainly Europeans and the odd American, and it's just so refreshing to see, and it gives you somebody to support as well as a cycling fan. So yeah, that's a really good story that you've experienced. So what was your favourite part of cycling then? Just staying on that theme for a little bit. You mentioned the time trials. What achievements did you hit at that point?
Yeah, so the time trials are sort of, I guess, probably taken over the years. Probably competed in more of those by a long way than any sort of multisport stuff, I guess. So I've raced kind of national championships and won a few I won a bit of a team prize over the years. So I've really made an effort to sort of try all the distances, or nearly all the distances. And I find myself maybe a little bit stronger at the slightly longer distances. So I started off, my sort of goal for the first few years was to go one longer distance each season. Mm-hmm. So started out with a Wednesday evening lap round Chew Valley Lake, and that was 8 and a bit miles or something. And then the year after that was a 10-mile time trial. And to start with, the times were fairly rubbish. And then sort of started getting a bit more serious and bought myself a time trial bike, nothing extravagant. And entered a 25, then a 50 mile, then a 100 mile. And yeah, sort of built it up that way, really. The times came down. I think I managed to hit just under 20 minutes for, I think it was 20 and a half minutes for a 10-mile time trial. So just under 30 miles an hour. And then a 25 mile. I think my best is sort of about 53 minutes. So sort of 28 mile an hour, something like that. And then, a little bit less for 50 miles and things like that. But I suppose quite a relatively sort of historic achievement, I suppose, was back in 2021. Myself and two guys that I was racing with, we managed to get the team award for something called Best British All-Rounder, which was a very sort of, it's a competition, for those who don't know, that's been running since about 1930. And it's the combined average speed for a 50 mile, 100 mile, and a 12-hour time trial.
Right.
And it's so, I think I'd managed about 24 mile an hour average between the three events or something. But there's some very, very strong competition in it. People averaging some ridiculous speeds, but between the three of us, it's not quite so competitive as it used to be. But between the three of us, we were all racing for an outfit in Bristol. I'd sort of joined before that, called FTP Racing, who are also a triathlon affiliated club now. But we managed to take away the sort of team prize for that. So yeah, that was a good event. That was myself, a guy called Tim McAvoy, and another guy called John Schubert. So yeah, it was that was kind of cool. 12-hour time trials are brutal.
Yeah. I think it's funny, isn't it? Because there's all these random events in various different sports that, unless you speak to somebody like yourself, nobody's ever heard of. Like that the team best all-round time trial. And like the amount of people that, unless they're into it or they're into cycling in a big way, they would never have heard of that. And I think it's really nice to open that up to other people to say there are different events out there, not just in cycling, but in multisport in general, and sport in general. Yeah, exactly. I saw that in your email. That's why I asked you particularly about your cycling background, because I saw that particular point, and I was hoping you were going to come to it and bring it up. So thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a really interesting, because I think kind of coming in, I think a lot of people tend to come into triathlon perhaps from running is from what I've seen more of a popular route in. Whereas I do think sort of triathletes and people training and wanting to race and stuff could learn a hell of a lot from getting involved with the cycling events and having that crossover between the two sort of sports. I don't want to separate them too greatly, but a 25-mile time trial is such fantastic preparation for a 40k bike leg of a standard distance triathlon or duathlon. You're not going to get that preparation anywhere else, and it's you're paying 10, 12 quid to enter an event on a Sunday morning. There's hundreds around every year. It's just fantastic training for it. I'm sure people are doing park runs and things like that all the time, so you might as well get involved with some local cycling stuff. And if you're doing a sprint distance triathlon or duathlon, building those group riding skills would be absolutely invaluable in a local criterium race or something.
Yeah, 100%. I think, as you've proved, and as well as we know, that the cycling leg of all the events is the biggest chunk. So, in your case, very strong cyclist, better runners in duathlons and triathlons and whatever, but you make it up on the bike, and, you can make a big enough gap, I guess, to sustain that for the second run in the case of a duathlon. So it is, you're right, it's invaluable to get, one, to learn the skills, like you just said, and two, to get to grips with those events, which are going to make you a stronger cyclist. Exactly.
And then sort of into the going forward this year, for my sins, I've decided to enter a 24-hour time trial. So it's essentially a case of who can achieve the furthest distance in 24 hours. So we'll see how it goes. It's very much uncharted territory for me. I mentioned I'd done the 12-hour one before, but it's quite significantly different. So we'll see how it goes. Riding all night will be interesting. I've sort of done quite a bit of another thing sort of in my cycling background was I've done quite a bit of sort of cycle touring and a few kind of endurance races and things like that. And again, they're fantastic training for your cycling event. Just get your bike, stick some panniers on the back. Yeah. And I've ridden in a fair few countries. I did a trip about last September with me and my friend, and we took our bikes, bit of camping equipment, panniers, things like that, and then we flew to Innsbruck in Austria. Right. And then we cycled from there to down through Austria, through Liechtenstein, over the Swiss Alps, Davos, San Moritz, down into Italy, round Lake Como, and then finished in Milan. And that was 6 days, 7 days, couple of £100 probably, cheap flight, and we were using sort of local hosts and things like that to put us up for the night. So that's another good preparation for the longer cycling events, I suppose, and great fun at the same time. So
100%. I mean, that's like base training to the extreme, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's just going to give you such a great grounding, for a season. If you do something like that, it's just yeah, fantastic. So I've noticed down here also have you done the National Cycling Hill Climb Championship, or are you going to do it?
No, I have raced that.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually it was a strange time to do it, but I've only raced it once. But it was 2020.
Yeah.
It was sort of late October of 2020, so they were sort of semi in lockdown at the time, I think. So there was quite a few people who weren't able to attend because of the different zones and things at the time. I can't quite remember, but didn't exactly set the world on fire. It's too short of an effort for me, but it was cool to attend. It was a hill down in sort of near Reading.
Okay.
So just for anyone listening, they're a very simple premise hill climbs, basically. So it's people starting at 1 minute intervals or 30-second intervals, and it's the fastest person to ride up a hill. So that hill could be 3 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 20 minutes, whatever. There's a complete spread all across the UK. Again, they're sort of local events. They generally tend to happen sort of September, October time, but they always evolve into a national championships. So yeah, I'd raced that in 2020. It was a short, sharp effort. Again, it was a slightly depleted field because of COVID, but yeah, cool to do nonetheless. Unfortunately, there was no spectators allowed, but I'm planning to enter again this year. Again, it's traditionally the last weekend of October, but this year it's being held on a climb called the Struggle in the Lake District.
Oh yeah, everybody's heard the Struggle.
Yeah, so,
nice easy one then.
Yeah, nice and flat. So yeah, it's actually a decent length this year. So I might I'll probably be sticking an entry in for that. They're an absolutely fantastic thing to go and ride or support, because you're getting a couple of hundred, maybe 300 people from all over the UK come into this event, and they might bring friends, family, local cycling clubs, whatever will come out, and it's just like riding in the Tour de France. You've got hundreds of people screaming and shouting at you up the side of a hill in the middle of the Lake District in probably October. And they held an event last year on the same course as a bit of a tester for it, and it was you can see the videos on YouTube, and it's just quite a party atmosphere. I didn't race it last year, but it was in I think it was a climb called the Old Shoe in sort of Denbighshire. Sort of North Wales kind of area, but yeah, very different to Multisport, but because it's literally just an all-out short effort. So yeah, we'll see if we can get some fitness for that later in the season. But
right, on. Well, you should be fit for it by then. So going back to Multisport, you were talking about going into triathlon.
Yeah.
So how's the preparation going for that? Have you done any previously?
So I've done 2 standard distance triathlons previously, just for a bit of fun, really. So the first one I did was, I think, 2019, an event in Cotswold Water Park run by LPS Events, sort of near Cirencester. So it was a lake swim, 40k run, and then 40k ride, then a 10k run around the lake. And my swimming was very much the weak, or still continues to be the weak of the 3. But the first time doing it, it was not particularly good. I really struggled with things like sighting. I'd done very little open water swimming up to that, which probably wasn't the best idea. But I was just all over the place on the swim. My sighting was off. I wasn't really sticking to the course. I was nowhere near anyone else. I just sort of got round, I suppose, and then caught up a little bit on the bike and the run. But yeah, a lot of lessons learned then. And then again, did the same event last September, and a lot better on the swim. and learned a lot of lessons again from doing it a second time. Generally swimming is better as well. I've been swimming a lot more regularly, sort of, once or twice a week where I can, around work and things, but a lot, a big improvement there. It's still a long way from, in comparison to the other two, a lot of work to do, but struggled a little bit on that one with my breathing and things, getting onto the bike and the run afterwards. But I'm sure a few people have experienced that, but certainly some lessons learned. So this year the intention is a middle distance triathlon in a similar sort of location. Actually, it's quite a popular one for the triathlons. Just to see, really, it's a step up in distance, and then we'll see beyond that, maybe an Ironman or Ironman distance event. We'll see how this summer goes, really.
Yeah, good. Are you coached? Are you in any triathlon club or anything?
No, so no, I'm not coached, to answer that question. I run with a running club called CDF Runners in Cardiff. I race with a triathlon and time trial and cycling team, essentially, based out of Bristol, called FTP Racing. Okay. I've sort of just picked up a lot of tips over the years, really. I suppose I probably would be in a position to look at some coaching, but I'm sort of in a position that I kind of enjoy the flexibility of not being in that position. Just reflecting on last year, it was some very, very different events that I'd entered. So from some long TTs to a short triathlon to the World Duathlon Championships. I think if you were to put that in front of a coach, they would go, "What the hell are you doing? What's the scope of your plan here?" And it'd be, I don't know, really. I'm just sort of going with what I enjoy and training where I can. So I do have a job and a relatively busy job and other commitments outside of work. So I probably would benefit from it, I suppose, but just get the right people around you and you can sort of learn from each other. We'll see what happens. I think looking into this year, some of the longer events, I guess some of the building blocks are already there from maybe the cycling and the running perspective. I think swimming could probably do it with a bit of work, but potentially I might look at getting some bit of professional advice when it comes to things like technique and stuff, because that's probably a bit rusty. I've learned to swim 20 years ago and probably haven't had that much in terms of technique work since. So yeah, we'll see.
So on an average, say you're looking to us to do those distances in triathlon. On an average week, then what's your training plan look like?
So something I've sort of put in this winter, which I probably should have been doing long ago, to be honest, is also a bit of gym work. So that's something to sort of take into consideration. But I try and do sort of, where possible, one long ride a week, so maybe 4 hours, plus a couple of sort of good sessions, I guess. So maybe a turbo session or maybe a sort of cycling club hill session, something like that, which will be maybe 5 times 4 minute hill efforts, something like that, depending on what I'm sort of aiming for with the running, but at least try and get one run a week in, whether or not that's sort of a longer, steadier run or a shorter, harder run, just sort of depending on the time of year and what's going on, really. But then I'm trying to swim once a week at the moment, minimum, and then just get a couple of gym sessions in. I'm really noticing the effect actually of that, the gym work. Just sort of, I felt last year when I wasn't really swimming quite as much, it was basically legs and legs. So it was just running legs or cycling legs. Whereas, I feel a bit stronger on the bike, maybe. I'd had a few back issues as well, nothing too serious, but yeah, that was certainly something that's hopefully is improving. So that's maybe, that's maybe an hour a week, 2 hours a week of gym, half an hour to 45 minutes swim. Probably could do more than that, but yeah, maybe a couple of hours running, and then 6-8 hours on the bike, something like that. So yeah, depends on the week, depends if I'm traveling with work and whatnot.
Yeah,
so
that's it. You've got to fit it in around your life, haven't you? That's the key, and sounds like you're doing that. And it's just progression as well, isn't it? And consistency. And
yeah, exactly. You just got to fit it in when you can. I was working in France a couple of weeks ago, and just took me trainers down and a t-shirt and a pair of shorts, and I was there for 3 days. So 3 runs on a morning, basically.
Yeah.
Better than couldn't take a bike and wasn't really a pool locally. So
that's it. Fit it in when you can. That's the main thing. I mean, that's a really interesting background, especially from your cycling side of it. It's obviously your strength. And good luck with what you want to achieve this year coming up in your triathlon. Hope it goes well. I've got a few quick fire questions now that I usually ask everybody. And the first one is, what's your favourite bit of kit?
Favourite bit of kit? Garmin watch.
Garmin watch?
Yeah.
And what watch have you got?
A bit of a random one, actually. I've got Garmin Instinct, which I bought a few years ago, but does perfectly good job for most things. So I've used it for multisport and running and whatnot. So I'd quite happily use it on the bike as well if needed.
And what advice would you give for anybody wanting to get into multisport, and also who wants to qualify to represent GB?
I'd say just give it a try. I mean, I appreciate that there is usually quite a lot of kit to sort of come by if you do want to go straight into, say, triathlon, but perhaps if you're probably going into multisport having done perhaps one of the sports before, so maybe take that sport that you know and you enjoy, and you've maybe got a bit of some of the kit for anyway. So take running. You've got your trainers already. If you want us to do a triathlon, buy a bike first and do a duathlon, and then think about getting a wetsuit or whatever a month down the line, and sort of build it out from there, I suppose. I think that would be the best way of doing it. And just join a local club, whether that be cycling, triathlon, swimming, running, whatever. Just go and find some other people that you are into the similar things you are. It doesn't have to be a triathlon club. If you haven't got access to that one, they're not everywhere. So yeah, just helps to have someone to motivate you.
Yeah, good advice. Really good advice. And what resources do you use, Adam, to help you with multisport in general, I guess?
In terms of sort of data, or?
It could be anything. Could be books, could be videos, could be data. What's helped you improve that you've used?
I think from a sort of cycling and maybe a running perspective, I've both been having those connections built through clubs and events and competitions and things like that, and just slowly building up the knowledge and the experience. But I must admit, when it comes to the swimming, I've actually just been watching GTN videos.
It's such a great resource, isn't it?
For sure. So yeah, just basic swimming techniques, maybe some of the transition practice, things like that. Some of the sort of core triathlon skills or multisport skills. So yeah, and there's so much information on there. It's unreal, really, to learn from. And if you're having one particular thing you're struggling with, whether that be fueling or running off the bike or swimming technique in my case, then just stick it on YouTube. Something will probably come up.
Yeah, 100%. And finally, then, what's your shorter and your longer term goals?
I think we sort of covered shorter term goals, so just sort of in this season really. So a bit of triathlon, a longer time trial, maybe the hill climb at the end of the season. Longer term, do you know what? I think I would say an Ironman.
Right.
Step up from a middle distance to a full Ironman, maybe even a full Ironman event, and see where that takes me.
Yeah. Any particular favourite you would like to try and attempt to do?
I'm not sure really. I need to look into it properly, to be totally honest. But I know there's an Ironman Wales, so that would be quite cool to do. Relatively home road for me, so
quite a tough one, I believe.
I've heard that.
Yeah. Well, listen, it's been really nice to speak to you and listen to your story. And thank you once again for agreeing to come on and share it. And hopefully, like I said earlier, inspire everybody, because that's what we're doing it for. How can people follow you on Instagram or Facebook? Are you on those?
I use Instagram. I think it's like Adam's Adventures or something is my username, of something fairly general.
Okay.
Absolute pleasure chatting to you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. Great lesson. I'll look forward to it.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you once again to Adam for getting in touch and sharing his story. I just love hearing the variety of backgrounds that people have come from into multisport. And in Adam's case, the cycling world, and how he's using it to his advantage. So good luck to Adam in all his future adventures. As usual, we'll be keeping an eye on his progress on Instagram and watching his success. And that's about it for this episode. Thank you once again for listening. If you'd like to come on the podcast and share your story, or if you'd like to leave some comments, you can drop us an email at agegroupmultisportpodcast@gmail.com. We are on Instagram at amp_1967. We are on Facebook, ampgb. You can find us on Twitter at Agegroup Multisport Podcast. We've got our own YouTube site, which is ampgb. And I would really appreciate it if you could spare some time to rate and review this podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcast. It really would help the profile and get us out to more like-minded people. So until next time, don't forget, stay safe, keep training, and love the process.